First of all, I wanted to thank CISP and Archie for organizing this stakeholder event. And also thanks to the GET project partners for inviting me to speak here today. My name is Alexandra Matthys, and I'm Education and Lifelong Learning Officer at SOLIDAR Foundation. And today I wanted to reflect on global citizenship education and how we can ensure that GCE achieves its full transformative potential. And I want to consider in this question different learning environments, so both formal learning environments and non-formal learning environments. To be able to address this question and reflect on this question, because I'm not going to answer, of course, I'm not going to give all the answers on this question, because I think we already had quite some topics covered today, and I don't think it would be possible for me to give an exhaustive answer on this question, but I just want to give some food for thought. And first of all, I will give you an introduction of SOLIDAR and how we work on global citizenship education. Then I will go into the need for taking a critical approach to GCE in order to really fulfill its transformative potential. And then I will also go into some policy recommendations that SOLIDAR Foundation has created throughout the years based on our policy work, which is based on research and experiences from our member organizations. And last but not least, I also want to give an illustration of a good practice of the SOLIDAR Foundation network, and I will present the ACA project. So to start, what is SOLIDAR and SOLIDAR Foundation? SOLIDAR is a European network of civil society organizations working on advancing social justice through a just transition in Europe and worldwide. We have over 50 member organizations based in 26 countries, and our members include national CSOs in Europe and also outside of Europe. So we do our work, we focus our work on three different pillars. So we have the pillar of international cooperation, the pillar of social affairs, and the pillar of education and lifelong learning. Me, myself, I work in a team that works on education and lifelong learning. So what are our priorities in our work on this topic? We have 4 specific priorities while working on education and lifelong learning. First and foremost, it's our work on global citizenship education. Secondly, we work and advocate for the value of non-formal and informal learning, since our member organizations are active in this sector. We also work to make lifelong and life-wide learning a reality for all. And last but not least, we also focus part of our work on leveling the digital playing field and closing the digital divide. I wanted to give you a quick recap about our work on GCE, but this is really, in a nutshell, what we've been doing. GCE has been central to our organization for many years. And most recently, we have our policy and advocacy cycle that started in 2023 and will end this year, where every year we produce a policy paper on the topic of GCE connected to a specific topic each year. In 2023, we had the topic of global citizenship education and the importance of non-formal and informal learning in providing GCE. In 2024, as already introduced, we published a policy paper on democratic participation and GCE, and especially how GCE impacts the democratic participation of youth. And then this year, we are producing a policy paper on the topic about how GCE impacts learners from different socioeconomic backgrounds. This policy paper will be launched on the 2nd of December in the afternoon at the European Parliament and also online. So please save the date if you're interested in finding out more about our policy paper of this year. So that's an illustration of our policy and advocacy work the past years. Besides this, we also do capacity building for our member organizations and partners. A couple of weeks ago, we organized, for example, a training on digital citizenship education and how to advocate for DCE and democratic participation. We also participate in projects together with our member organizations and partners related to global citizenship education. And we also do alliance building And an example of this is the Civil Society Alliance for Global Citizenship Education, of which SOLIDAR is one of the co-coordinators. And with this alliance, we try to advocate for GCE at the EU level, together with like-minded civil society organizations. So our member organizations, they are active in the non-formal learning sector, and they work on GCE in different ways. They use different methodologies, they tackle different topics, they work with different target groups. But what is really uniting them is the approach to GCE and the endeavor to strive to achieve social justice through education and to ensure that all learners have access to quality, publicly financed education in a lifelong and life-wide manner. I know that today we've already seen a lot of concepts about how we call GCE and a lot of definitions, so allow me to throw another one in the mix. So here you can see the definition of how SOLIDAR Foundation perceives GCE. Of course, we don't want this to be a narrow-minded definition, or we don't want this to be an exhaustive definition, but just we see it as a common understanding of GCE among our members. So it's a definition developed by Professor Andriotti, and it states that GCE is understood as political education on a global scale, which prepares learners to develop a sense of belonging to the global community, to get involved and to take an active role in society in order to contribute to a peaceful, just world in which ecological resources are preserved. So leading from this definition, we really see GCE as a central approach in both formal and non-formal education to challenge and expand our understanding of the world, which really makes which really illustrates the transformative potential of GCE. And while I was thinking about this question on how can we ensure that GCE achieves its full transformative potential, one of the topics that popped up was that scholarship points to the need for a critical approach to GCE. So this means a GCE that goes beyond traditional frameworks and that emphasizes social justice and enables truly transformative learning experiences. Scholarship points for the need for a critical approach to GCE because some critical points are raised about the predominant concept of GCE. For example, literature shows that the predominant concept of GCE carries implicit Western biases. For example, the Western liberal individualism is presented as something unbiased, or Western viewpoints are presented as universal. And sometimes this predominant concept of GCE also aligns with neoliberal policies, which of course undermines some of the key aims of GCE, which is global solidarity and sustainability. But how can critical GCE emphasize the transformative potential of education? It can do so by encouraging learners to reflect on their values, to engage with controversial issues, and to question power structures. Therefore, scholarship suggests leaning towards a GCE for critical consciousness, so a practice that is unafraid of addressing the political and the controversial. So it's a practice that puts into question power relations and addresses inequality and oppression. Some of the tools that are proposed in advancing a critical GCE across both formal and non-formal education settings are, for example, the use of pedagogical tools that foster genuine connection, human dignity, and collaborative action, and promoting a critical approach and creating reflective spaces for educators to learn from each other and reflect on how to do so. And of course, to support teachers in delivering effective critical GCE. We already know that the teacher profession knows a lot of challenges, and we don't want to give them even more workload. We also should support them in this endeavor. That's why citizenship education must be integral to both pre-service and in-service teacher training. But to really provide a critical GCE, it's an ongoing process. You see at the bottom of the slide one of the a quote of one of our members that states, GCE activities can be more accessible if we as providers are aware what is needed is both work on ourselves and also systematic change through advocacy and working with policymakers. So we really see the dual need to both have to do a continuously individual reflection to think about how we approach GCE, but then also to strive for systematic change through advocacy and working with policymakers. So this brings me to the second part of my presentation today, and it's striving for systematic change. At SOLIDAR Foundation, one of the ways we do this is by doing advocacy at the EU level. And I would like to mention some of our policy recommendations based on our previous work on GCE that we believe could foster GCE's transformative force in education. So we see that we already mentioned that there's quite some policies, but there's an implementation gap in the classroom. Partially, this can be ascribed to a lack of political will to really keep the global in GCE. For example, in EU policies, GCE is often narrowly framed around EU values, overlooking global challenges, for example, climate change. And it's really needed to reintegrate the global in GCE, as it is essential to equip learners of all ages with skills and solidarity and critical perspectives needed to be responsible and active citizens. There's also, of course, the political landscape and narrative nowadays that is challenging to, makes it challenging for GCE to reach its transformative potential at the policy level as well. So we see that at the EU level, there's often, when thinking about education, an emphasis on the labor market and providing skills for employability. But this narrow focus risks overlooking deeper societal and democratic challenges. So what we advocate for is, and what is urgently needed, are citizens equipped with transversal and citizenship competences that are able to think critically, act responsible, and engage across borders. So of course, the EU doesn't have the direct control on education policies of its member states, but it does play a guiding role by promoting common benchmarks and standards across the Union. That's why we advocate for a coordinated EU strategy, as we believe it would enhance the quality and consistency of GCE across member states. Therefore, EU-level frameworks and benchmarks should be developed, which include quality criteria, methodologies, and practical guidance for educators and policymakers. So I was maybe a bit critical in the previous slides about how the EU approaches GCE and its policy. Despite the challenges relating to the political narrative nowadays, we also see some entryways to advocate for GCE at the EU level. For example, as part of the Union of Skills, the Commission has launched its Basic Skills Action Plan. This Basic Skills Action Plan recognizes, besides the more traditional basic skills such as literacy, mathematics and science skills, also digital and citizenship competences as a basic skill. And this is, of course, a great development, and we welcome this very much. And we think it's also an interesting development to try to advocate to ensure the inclusion and measurable progress of GCE, since you have these different basic skills in the action plan, but the citizenship competence skills is the only one without an EU-level target. So we believe that it would be a great chance to advocate for this, since discussions are ongoing to move towards a measurable knowledge-based target for citizenship competences. And this could be a chance to establish or to facilitate the establishment of a binding target on citizenship competences also at national levels. But of course, it's important in this sense to keep in mind that this should recognize learning in all contexts and ensure inclusion of adult and marginalized groups through assessment and validation systems. Of course, one of the strategic recommendations that would enable GCE's full potential as a transformative force in education is funding. We already talked about it a lot today. There's different funding programs for GCE at the EU level, but these are at times not very well coordinated between the different DGs that are in charge of them. Sometimes they're overlapping, we see some fragmentation, so these funding schemes can be better aligned and coordinated. But of course also we know that at the moment the next EU long-term budget, the multi-annual financial framework, is being negotiated. And in this sense it's really vital to advocate for sustainable, predictable and accessible GCE. It doesn't matter which new programs they introduce, we need to make sure that GCE keeps being funded in an accessible way for all education stakeholders. Yeah, and I think it's already been discussed today, but we see funding-wise that there's, in different learning environments, not enough funding. We see in formal education, there's a lack of funding. NGOs are often dependent on project-based funding, which is often very short-term. And therefore, we would also advise to integrate GCE funding into national strategies for long-term impact. Another one of our recommendations addresses how the multi-actor approach can strengthen the implementation of GCE. So also following what our previous speakers have shared is that at school level, the participation of all actors of the school community must be promoted through a whole school approach. For example, the provision of training and capacity building opportunities about GCE can be provided not only to teachers, but also policymakers, school leaders, and all actors involved in formal education. And of course, the cooperation among non-formal and informal learning is also key in this sense, as it can enhance the participatory approach and outreach of quality GCE beyond formal schooling and also with a lifelong learning perspective. To conclude, I wanted to give an illustration of one of our good practices, which is the ACCA project, the Active Citizens Project, which was a project that ran for 2 years from 2023 until 2024 and was self-funded, and it took place in 8 countries. So the aim of the ACCA project was to promote democratic participation and engagement at the EU level among young citizens from underrepresented backgrounds. It did so by implementing workshops using GCE methodologies that aim to tackle social challenges and structural inequalities, and engaging youth in dialogue with local policymakers addressing these challenges. Some of these GCE methodologies used illustrate how GCE can foster transformative learning, critical thinking, and democratic participation. And one of the key outputs of the project, the ACCA booklet, goes deeper into the methodologies that can be used for fostering social action and democratic engagement. The ACCA booklet was produced in 8 languages. You can see them on the slide. So if you would be interested to explore them in your language, please feel free to have a look at our website. And the toolkit aims to be a practical guide for educators and practitioners that are keen on promoting transformative and learning experiences. It touches upon different GCE methodologies that can be used both in non-formal education and formal education, such as the World Café methodology, the using art and activism, and also the guerrilla gardening methodology. So the toolkit offers concrete tools, approaches and definitions, and also steps to support the community of education practitioners in familiarizing with GCE, start practicing it, or also further develop different methodologies. So just to recap, I touched upon, to answer or to reflect on this question, how to make GCE as a transformative force in education. I touched upon some different aspects. I emphasized the need for a critical approach to GCE, some policy recommendations that could enable GCE as a transformative force, especially at the EU level. But of course, this is, as I said, not an exhaustive list. This is more to provide food for thought for you, and I would also be very interested to hear your perspectives on this matter, how you would answer this question coming from your organizations. So I don't know if we have time now. We don't have time. So we don't have time, and I want to provide you food for thought, but I don't want to starve you of the real food. So please feel free to come to me, discuss this. I'm also here tomorrow, so we can take our time. So thank you very much, and enjoy the lunch.